Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today I am in the suit. We have a commission. It is the commission suit. It's a nice suit. I like to wear it. And, yeah, today we're talking about voice acting. I was commissioned to talk about voice acting, my take on it, and where I've gone. And right up front, though, I've got to say that it's important to remember that I've really only been doing this for, like, I don't know, 3 years now, something like that. And everything that I've done is totally self-taught. And so, as with the comedian thing, I regard myself as like an amateur, maybe like a decent amateur. But if you ever heard from someone who's like made their entire life, like if they've been doing voice acting since back in the 70s or something like that, those guys probably, if they ever gave contradictory advice to something that I said, they probably know what they're talking about. So bear that in mind. I'm gonna try to avoid giving any advice that could get you into like habits or anything like that. I can't think of a lot of things that I do that are habitual, but that's kind of the danger, really, is that I'm sure that I wouldn't even know if I was giving bad advice. But that said, anyway, though, voice acting, what I've done, how I've learned it, I can still teach some about that. Now, and actually, when I first started doing character voices, it was way back in sort of the beginning of high school, because that's when I started doing role-playing games, the kind of stuff that I talked to you guys about, like Children of the Sandler and things like that. Because the whole concept, the idea of a role-playing game is that you're supposed to make a character, and then you play that character. And so for my case, I always like to make really interesting characters, and then I would do their voices, and shout, and this and that. It's actually better if you run a game, if you're a GM, because you get to play a bunch of different characters, and your players have to know who they're talking to, so you've got to come up with like ways of differentiating people. So this is actually how I first got introduced to this idea of voicing characters. Was I was a GM for role-playing games, and I needed to create characters that people could recognize. And so, like, if I had a bear man and he was like, everybody had accents, was really how I first started doing this sort of thing. And I found that accents are actually the simplest way to differentiate voices. When I first started doing the Mentally Advanced series, I had a really hard time. All the characters sounded alike, but the ones that had thicker accents were a little bit easier to tell. Like Applejack still sounds quite a lot like Twilight when I do that voice, but giving her the accent makes it a little bit easier for people to tell from Twilight, and because you can hear the different enunciations, and actually you'll find that the cadence of the voice too also makes a big difference. I still struggle with it. Like, I know that Tito shows up. We have a character Tito in the Mech Warrior series, and Tito sounds kind of a lot like everybody else, or he sounds a lot like Twilight or Jordan. He sounds a lot like Jordan sometimes, and with Jordan being just my normal voice. Kind of my normal voice, but more firm. And more or less, it's really more about the way that he talks, and that's kind of how you tell him apart. But this sort of struggle, that's sort of crap for the viewers sometimes, because you can't always use the same cadence all the time, or else it gets boring. So, yeah, so it's a good start, but you'll want to practice getting to divide your voices. But yeah, accents. Accents were the best thing for me to just practice, to get really good at, to get good at accents. And you'll want accents. They make things different. Even if it's just something as subtle as like a New Jersey accent versus a Southern accent, it's valuable. It's something that you can do. The learning how to do different voices, though, different pitches, that's something that comes with pretty much with practice. What I've done is, after I started doing recording for the Mentally Advanced series, I got much more into the habit of of like screaming at myself in the shower. Is one of the things that I like to do. Is I'll go in like the shower, and I'll while I'm cleaning myself, I'll scream to myself in Pinky speak or in Scottish accents and things like that. I come up with bizarre lines or scenarios in my head that I act out. And just kind of on the spot, I practice various accents. I used to do this for role-playing games as well, actually. I would pace around my room and then like shout at myself in accents. And that was so I could get into the character and do it well when I went to go play. But yes, practice is pretty much the best way to go. And to do that, you really will have to either start recording like every single day, or you've really got to just embrace the insanity of talking to yourself on a regular basis. So I do both. Excuse me. I do both, actually. The Let's Play series have been really nice, surprisingly. I'm glad that I did these, because they've helped me get more comfortable with doing the voices, and just the sheer quantity of the voice acting that I've done through the Let's Play series allows me to sort of go back and listen to, like, how was I doing things, like, what do I need to improve. You also start to develop a quantity of like watching statistics and stuff like that, and you can see like what are people watching, what are people not. And I tend to find that the first 30 seconds of every performance is what everybody watches, and then after that they're either going to stay or they're going to go. So that's a thing to think about. Is you want a really strong performance in your first 30 seconds because that's what's going to draw everybody in. If you're weak in the first 30 seconds, then everybody just goes home. Yeah, but that sort of thing, basically for my case, because I really kind of just learned by doing things, the best thing for me was just to start doing it and then doing it every single day. Can I say everybody's voice is a little bit different. So in terms of like finding your own voices, like I could never do Alan's celestial voice. But that's why I say you just got to practice different things, go in the shower, shout at yourself. You could do what little Karibo does, actually, and I've done this a bit myself, is you notice that he actually will try to mimic voices that he sees on the television or things like that. Like he did a lot of Adult Swim characters, where he would try to replicate their manner of speaking, their particular style of voice acting. If you do that, or if you try to mimic celebrities like Bill Cosby, we've got both Alan and DeMarcus can do Bill Cosby. We've got DeMarcus does Aurora, the Bill Cosby voice. If you can mimic like interesting celebrities, that's another good way, because you can sort of like train your ear to hear the difference. So those are good tips. In terms of the technical side of things, though, the technical stuff is kind of interesting. It's not too complicated. If you're putting stuff together, if you're actually doing all the editing, you get into issues of pacing and so forth. You want your characters to sound like they're having a natural conversation. But in terms of getting clean audio, really the best thing for it is to go out and you buy a decent mic. And there's a variety of mics you can actually choose from. There's no singular mic that's most effective. But I find that there's a couple music stores around the area, and they usually carry what I'm looking for. I mean, there's one large one that carries just about anything I could want. They've even got like lapel mics and stuff like that, even though you think lapel mics wouldn't be that useful for music. But the music store, though, they're kind of like music and audio stores, really. Those are the best place to go and get your microphones. I find that the ones that are decent, they usually cost in the range of like, I mean, like cheaper than $60, and you're starting to get fuzzy quality. But you don't have to actually go out and get the top ranking equipment right off. If you're just kind of interested in doing it for fun and you want to give it a shot, if you have a mic, the only thing that I'll say you should never ever use, be careful with like built-in mics. Like anything that's built next to a computer fan is going to be crap, because you're going to oftentimes record your computer fan more than you're going to be able to record your own voice. So avoid that. Get an external mic. I would say avoid headset mics. I've got one. This is actually kind of amusing. I've got a headset mic, and it's so bad that I actually have used it in the past to simulate a drive-through window. Like, I did it in Biker Gorilla. I got out that mic, and I put it on, and I just talked into it, and I just recorded normally. And it was so distorted and so messed up, it was like it just sounded exactly like a drive-through window. So that was, I would like a double happy, and then we have just the one line, like, you can get a double happy, get the hell out of my drive-through. So yes, we use the headset mic for that. But what you can do though, even if you record with a bad mic, a good set of headphones is also a good idea, so you can hear this a little bit better. But when you record with any mic, you'll usually get a certain amount of buzz, or not like buzz necessarily. Buzz is bad. That might mean that you've got a funny connection on your mic, but you'll hear like static. So if you turn it up, like if you amplify by, I don't know, like 10 decibels, you'll hear just a nice steady flow of static. And that's just air passing over the mic. That's kind of crap, because what I do is I record at really low settings. I take the gain on the mic and I turn it all the way down, and then I record. And this is so that I can scream and shout into the mic, because as you'll see, I use Audacity personally. It's free software. And you can see as you record, when you scream, you have the amplitude of your screaming goes way up, and it hits the ceiling of the recording. And when it does that, that means that basically it didn't get recorded correctly. Your recording is screwed up, you've blasted out of the top, and when people hear it, it'll sound just really nasty. It's not good. You don't want peaking. So what I do is I record on very low gain, so that I've got like very small, everything's like, even if I scream in pinky voice like directly into the mic, it doesn't blast through the ceiling. And then I can adjust it manually as I go through. There's a device called the Compressor, which is kind of nice because it sort of evens everything out, but it's a little wonky and it doesn't always do what I want, and so I tend to find that really just manually adjusting the volume has been effective for me. I believe that it probably, like I say, this is where a difference would be between a professional and myself, is that a professional probably could figure out a much faster way of doing it, but I've just been mainly editing stuff manually. So, in any case though, you can't leave like peaks and nasty stuff in your, like, if you get a peak, like, Audacity is nice because it'll draw a red line where you have peaks, where your stuff is crap. So if you see that red line, then yes, it's ruined. That take is ruined. You've got to redo it. But yes, so recording on that low volume though, the result of that is I record on the very low volume and then I increase the amplitude until I get something that sounds about where I want it to be. It took me a while to get a good balance on this. I mean, eventually I had to sort of set up a standard for myself and say I will always record at this volume and always try to amplify to about this range. And for my case, like, it really depends on your mic. So you have to get used to your hardware and your software, and this is where I get into is, like, it's good to buy, you're better off with good hardware, but you can make do with poor hardware. It's just that it takes a lot more cleaning and takes a lot more effort. Yes, so there's a noise removal though. There's a noise removal program in Audacity, and what that is you will capture a little slice of sound that's just static, doesn't have anything in it, and you will say remember this, and then you go and you just tell it to remove all of that static sound from your whole recording, and then you've got nice and clean. It's very lovely. It will be worse. What's really terrible is if you get mechanical sounds. Stuff like a camera, and this is why I use this external mic. A camera has a microphone, but what it does is it's recording like right next to itself, and you can hear all the machinery inside the camera moving. So that's crap. Like, using camera mics is often very efficient. You don't really want to rely on that sort of thing. It's probably worse than any kind of external mic you could get a hold of. Where should I go? What else should I recommend on this stuff? Oh yeah, pops. Yeah, pops. When you speak into a mic, you'll also find problems where, like the P noises, when you force air out from your lips, then you'll get like really nasty sounds. They'll be like way louder. They won't be the soft flowing F sound. It'll be like a hard stop kind of thing. But what you can do to fix that is there's what's called a high pass filter, and if you go into you look in your tools on Audacity, you go down to the high pass filter, and then you get a 200. You set it to your frequency to 200 megahertz, I think it is, and you just run the high pass filter through all that. It'll clean that up somewhat. Like a really bad pop, like the one that I just intentionally did, probably won't get cleaned out. But if it's light, I mean, like if you just like maybe breathe a little bit on the mic through your nostrils, then the high pass filter will hopefully, ideally, make that go away. It's not terribly reliable. What a lot of people like to do is they like to buy pop filters. I don't have one personally. I know Kenza and I think Pederap both have them, but the pop filters are basically just a wire mesh, and what they do is they catch air and they sort of disperse it, so that way when you're shouting into your mic, you don't get as many pops. As long as you're not doing something silly, as long as you're not like popping directly into the mic on purpose, it won't be as bad. So that's one thing to think about. You don't have to get a pop filter, but they're pretty cheap as far as I'm aware. And I think I've seen, I believe Dragon Ball Z Abridged did a thing on this, and I think that he recommended you could just get one of those cooking implements, one of those wire mesh cooking implements. And if you wanted to do that, you could just hold it out in front of your mic, and that would be just as good. So yeah, pop filter. If you want one, they're helpful. But personally, what I do is I just speak a little bit away from the mic, and I try to avoid breathing directly into it. And with the high pass filter, it all works out. Although occasionally get your pops. It's worse with laughter. Pinkie Pie's laughter, because there's a lot of air forcing on that. Where else should we go? Oh, on the subject of phonemes, I was thinking, when I was talking about learning accents, one thing to bear in mind that's really interesting is that accents are actually made up of what are called phonemes, which are they're just the little units of language, like la versus law, la and law. That's all that an accent is that every language, every dialect, you learn phonemes as a child. And so when you go through, like if you're in England, you learn certain phonemes. And instead of picking up the American la, you would pick up the British law. And so that's how you pronounce everything. They're very they're very simple, like monosyllable, usually like 2 letters if you were going to spell them out. La, pa, da, sa, fa, you know, la, to, fa, ti, do, that sort of stuff. That's what you're actually practicing when you're getting into your accents, if it helps to know that kind of thing. It's a little bit more complicated than that, because of course every single word is just a bunch of phonemes strung together until you've got a word. But that's actually what you're trying to learn. It's much harder to learn the older you get, because the part of your brain that learns phonemes actually just starts to shut down of sorts. I mean, like, you retain the knowledge, but the older you get, the harder it is to learn a new accent. So if you're young, that's the best time to actually practice accents. As you get older, you'll have a slightly harder time. You can still do it, it just takes a while. It takes a fair amount of effort. So, yes, there's that. What else should I comment on? Things to worry about? I mean, I don't know. Practice. Audio adjusting. Trying to think if there's any like weird pitfalls that I ever fell into. I mean, I know there were. Peaking gain. Ah, yes. Enunciation. That's something to think about. Enunciation is one of those that's hard. I've actually been trying to practice that more as I go along. But you'll find that sometimes you'll slur your words. And when you're speaking naturally, people can understand what you were trying to say. But when you've got a very broad audience and some of them may not be native English speakers, it's tough if you don't enunciate well, because they won't be able to process exactly what you've said as well as like a native speaker could. They maybe don't know what you were trying to say because they don't hear the words quite as well. Maybe they don't even hear the same phonemes. This is something that's interesting. Kenza was trying to teach me. There's the Danish. It sounds like an L, but it's written as a D, and I don't even know how to pronounce it exactly. I can't hardly hear it. And so, like, if she says a word and she's using that particular sound, it just sounds like an L to me. It sounds like L, la, but this is not what it is. So yeah, for like a foreign audience, that can be really tough. So enunciation is actually really important. There's websites that have phrases that you can practice, and they're kind of interesting. There's one that I like. It's like, what is it? I need a box of biscuits, a box of mixed biscuits, and a biscuit mixer. And so you just repeat that stuff over and over again. And what it does is it'll loosen you up, and it'll make it to where you feel a little bit more comfortable pronouncing things. Most of them have a lot to do with alliteration or saying things like the 3 thugs set 3 thugs free, something like that. Rubber baby buggy bumpers is another one, more common. But by repeating those and pronouncing those until they're clear, you get a little bit more used to handling stuff that's just tough to say. And then you can rapidly spout things off, which is important because you want to be clear, but you also want to have a nice, consistent report so that people have fun listening to you. So practicing elocution is a really good idea. And in fact, I kind of recommend doing it as quickly as possible, because you can speak very quickly, and normally if you do, though, you wind up stumbling a little bit, and you'll be okay for your English speakers. But I have gotten emails from foreign speakers who say, Greg, I can sometimes not even tell what the ponies are saying. Could you tell me what they're saying? And this will be for translations. So if you want that kind of thing, it's really good to practice your elocution so that you can say all your words correctly and everybody knows what you're saying, even if they're foreign and they're not entirely familiar with the native language, or with the English language, that is. Their native language would be like whatever they came from. So yeah, elocution. Look into that. Look into exercises for elocution. Practice those. Do the practices somewhat regularly, and then that way you will be able to say things faster. It's especially, you'll notice too, when you start off with the elocution, if you're going to do it correctly, if you really focus on elocution, it'll actually slow you down. And so that's why you need to practice it, is you need to be able to do the elocution fast enough that it doesn't slow you down and you can still do your lines and be fascinating and fun and interesting. When I started really doing elocution exercises, it slowed down my voice acting somewhat. I don't know if people noticed, but I certainly did, and I wasn't happy with the increased slowness. So gradually, though, it's increased. Drink a lot of water too. That helps a lot. When your mouth gets dry, you can't speak as fluidly. Yes. So that will be that, I think, as far as I can think of on just tips and advice for stuff. Like I say, someone with a lot more experience probably knows a lot more. They could probably also tell you about getting into the business, which I'm sure is its own set of hurdles and stuff like that. Getting hired. It probably depends a lot. I mean, like, you probably need to know people. I mean, not necessarily, but I bet it's really hard to break into if you don't, like, at least know somebody. But, yes. In other news, though, that's it. We will have a promo up for Equestria Primates on Sunday. I am a little concerned because I know that Hasbro has given cease and desist orders on videos, but most of them have been things that were like just clear like copyright violations. Stuff like Journey of the Spark, I heard, has gotten like 3 cease and desist orders, and they still say they're continuing to go through with the video. I kind of hope that they don't, because it's somewhat crazy if they're going to do that. I know that there have been some other projects that have gotten cease and desist orders, but most of them were just flat out, they weren't parodies. They were kind of like, I just want to do a pony video, and then they did a pony video. So, hopefully we'll be okay. I have some concern, like the intro doesn't really say a whole lot. We poke fun at things implicitly right up front, but it's going to be kind of in the body of that episode that we start to really tease stuff and start to explain why in the heck it is that we are portraying many things as we are. There will be a lot of questions. We have many questions. Because right after, like, we cut to the scene, and there's, like, the little cookie train belching smoke as it chugs along, and so then we cut to a scene, and we're like, what are these made out of? What do they run on? So they start to, we joke about that sort of thing. But hopefully we won't get in any trouble. It'll be very exciting. Keep your eyes out for the cookie train that will be in the thing. Keep your eye out for the promo, and yes. Also, too, if you guys haven't heard, I've started putting stuff up on Patreon. I'm teaching myself to draw. In fact, actually, we got a really generous donation this month. Somebody, as a well-wish for the fact that I'm leaving CVS, like I said, we got a really generous donation, and it spurred me to go ahead and buy just a really affordable tablet. I found one that was well within my budget. It's sort of like again, kind of a hobbyist's tablet. But I'm going to teach myself to draw, and then that way I can maybe do more comics and stuff like that. Maybe more editing. There's a variety of things that I can do with a little bit of artistic skill, so I'm going to practice that. And as thanks to those of you who are supporting us on Patreon, I'm going to go ahead and post, as I learn to draw, I am posting stuff on Patreon for you guys to see. So if you guys are patrons, then that is up there. Also, too, I'm going to start doing incentives, and I'm going to try and think of more, but right now I'm doing basically Q&A stuff. And so every month I will go through and I'll do a Q&A, and anyone who opts in to ask me questions at the end of the month, I will answer your questions in a video. I will say hello and give a shout out to you and respond to whatever it is you ask. So that's in the plans. What else is going on? I believe that might be it. So yes, hopefully somewhat valuable. Like I say, maybe a little bit of insight, some good place to start as far as learning how to voice act. And yes, so I will catch you guys later.